Hello, this is Brookings Rail Watch, and in today's video I get on to Interstate 29 and follow it all the way up to Winnipeg, Manitoba. While there I spend about a day and a half in the city driving around looking for trains and other interesting rail activity. The day starts off early at the depot down the road where I spot 3427 just about to leave. Besides a few GP38s, RCP&E's roster consists entirely of SD40-2s. Turn up your volume to hear the nice low rumble of the EMD 645 E3 engine, but don't turn it up too high, as when he goes to blow his horn, it might blow your speakers out. And with that excitement out of the way, I hit the road. The drive is about 5 or 6 hours long, so I've gone ahead and mapped out some of the railways we'll be crossing along the way, so I could look for trains even before we get to Canada. Our first stop is to Victor, South Dakota, at the very northern part of the state, to visit the good old Sunflower Railroad. I came here not only just because I was interested in seeing the Sunflower Railway, but also because Victor, South Dakota supposedly holds the one and only Sunflower Railroad engine, an EMD SW1. Man mowing lawn. This is the first sign of life in Victor, South Dakota that I've seen today. I'm a little worried that they have the engine put in that building, in which case I might not be able to see it today. Got a lot of abandoned barns and warehouses, some of which are totally fallen apart. Looking to see if they got their engine hiding in any of these buildings. Got an old car in here. And I never found the Sunflower engine. Well, on that disappointing note, back to the Saturn. Before continuing back on to the interstate, I decided to go down the road a bit to Rossholt, South Dakota. Here I am in Rossholt, South Dakota, just like 5 miles down the road. This is where the Sunflower junctions up with Canadian Pacific Soo Line. I think at least this part right here is still CP. If you go down that way a bit, that eventually turns into Sunflower. Well, here comes something on the old railroad. On my way up along the side of North Dakota, I ran along BNSF Railway, but unfortunately never saw anything. Later up the road, I made a stop at Grafton, North Dakota, in search of some sort of headquarters or rail yard for the Dakota Northern Railway. When I got there, I punched in the street address, and I wandered around the area, but I couldn't find the building. It turns out that this sorry excuse for a man-made structure was apparently the headquarters. I did end up following up the DN Railway for a little while, and I found a lot of abandoned tracks, so I don't know if the DN is really operating anymore. Well, at least I found the BNSF terminal, but there isn't a whole lot to it either. Well, with another disappointing note out of the way, we got back on the road, and shortly after we were over the Canadian border. Okay, now for some actual train action. There was a railroad running parallel to the highway that I followed for a little while and didn't see a whole lot on it other than a few cars. But then finally I saw a few engines doing something. And it was just my luck that not only was there a crossing dead ahead, but they were also starting to fire up and they were going right for the crossing. I decided that during my visit I would go and see every rail yard in Winnipeg. I first discovered that the Canadian National Fort Rogue Yard was right next to the hotel. I first spotted a mysterious train with some odd-looking engines and cars. I'm not really sure what exactly these are for. I looked it up, and Loram is some sort of railway maintenance company, which would explain all of the heavy machinery on every car. I then spotted a pair of GP38s switching some cars back and forth. This went on for a while. Later that evening I found some more Canadian National track to film on. Because it was really in the middle of the city, it wasn't any particular subdivision, but for reference it was between the Fort Rogue Yard and the Transcona Yard.
The next day.
Next thing to see was the Canadian National Symington Yard. And this isn't your ordinary switching yard. This is a full-blown intermodal facility with thousands and thousands of cars. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get too many good shots of it, and we were only able to drive by, and it was very heavily fenced. But just from the footage I should really just give off how big this thing is. Now on the Canadian Pacific side of things, I was heading over to their main yard in Winnipeg when I spotted this Canadian Pacific train idling on the bridge. Now the trains in Winnipeg are massive and they often exceed over 120 cars. I'm surprised I don't see more trains doing this. This is what's called distributed power, where when the load gets so big they have to stick more locomotives either in the middle or some at the end or even both. And believe it or not, there aren't crews in every single locomotive. There are only crews in the front locomotive, and all of the other ones are radio controlled. And after sitting around for a while, I finally see the end of the train. This particular train was so long that they went with the option of putting extra power both in the middle and on the end. My best guess is there were probably also 2 engines pulling the front. This is the Canadian Pacific main yard. Just like the other yard, it's also pretty massive. I got to one point where I would just see engine after engine all piled up in one area. I skimmed along the fence line of this yard until eventually I found this engine here, moving a long line of tankers. I then spotted a GP-38 making a run for it. Next, I headed out to the Canadian National's Rivers subdivision. The Rivers subdivision is a two-track railway extending out to the west with a very high amount of activity. I left for a while, and when I came back I found this train heading into town. I decided to start chasing it down to see if I could get out and film it before I run out of straight road. The final yard I saw was the BNSF yard. Now, I would like to mention, since I said that I would be visiting every single yard, that I did actually do that, but the problem is a lot of them were small, fenced off and kind of hidden, and some of them were just lacking in activity, so I didn't show all of them. I showed the ones that had interesting things going on. So here I am at the BNSF yard. in Winnipeg, and this is one of the smallest yards. And the most interesting thing here is a don't whistle post. And despite this being BNSF's area for the entirety of Manitoba, there really isn't a whole lot to show for it. To end the day off, I decided to go down the same subdivision pretty far along the road, even to a point where the driving road turned into gravel. And then I parked along the tracks for exactly 1 hour, specifically at milepost 13.85. Remember that lore ram train from earlier? Well, here it comes, hightailing its way out of Winnipeg. For my final act of the video, I got in the car and went to see if I could chase the train and film it again. Anyway, that's it for this train expedition, so I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.